deployment options, because I know some people don't have Azure credits. I know some people are fighting with Microsoft for access to Azure. So there are a few other options that you have. I'll give you 3 other options, one of which is kind of I know will work, but is definitely a last resort. There are a couple of other very low cost or free. This site is not totally free, but they say they give you 60 days trial. It includes .NET hosting, and it includes SQL Server. I haven't tried it. I'm not sure if it supports ASP.NET Core or not, but they say there's a 60-day free trial without a credit card required. So this is myasp.net. You can look at this. I will put these links up on Blackboard, actually. And I think there's another link I've already put up on Blackboard inside of Tools and Resources. I'll put it up there now. So if you try this site, this myasp.net, and it actually seems to work, myasp, then maybe send me an email and let me know. And I will share that news with the class that seems to work. Okay. So I will put this in here. Blackboard seems to be super slow. These guys offer a 60-day free trial. There's also, I've had students in the past have some success. This host called Gear Host is not completely free. I think they charge $5 US per month. I'm pretty sure. I don't know why it's saying $0 a month. I'm not exactly sure. Start for free. So I had other students use this. I don't know if this includes. Oh yes. So you get in it. You get MS SQL. As long as you're under 10 megabytes, which we should be, that's free as well. So you could also try. You can try GearHost. They also support continuous deployment from GitHub, so you can connect to your GitHub repository and deploy that way. There is also AWS Educate, which you guys do get if you have the GitHub student pack. I believe you get $100 in free AWS credits. And they have, so you can try signing up. They do have many instances, so you can set up your own sort of virtual Microsoft server. It's kind of complicated. I know a few students in my Friday section are trying to get this to run. So you do have access to deploy here, but it's a fair bit more involved. So this might be a good option. I'll give you the link because you do get credits to use AWS for free. So you have a few options if you have no access to Azure, you have no credits. Okay, so those links are at the bottom of Tools and Resources. You can try any of those. If you absolutely cannot get any hosting to run, I can run your assignment locally, but you have some free alternatives to try. So it would be a last resort to send me your project to run locally. And the reason for this is I would then have to download and unzip every assignment and configure it individually, which means it's going to take a lot longer to get your marks back. So if I have to do it, I can. But I do need to show you what you will need to do if you just upload your web project to GitHub. I don't have your database. And if I don't have the database, I can't run your project. So you would also have to give me a copy of your database. I'll show you how to do this if you absolutely needed to. So I'll go to my local, here's my local, somewhere in here, here's my local server. So you'd have to connect to your local server in SQL Server and go to databases. So I'll do this with my Control-Alt-PC. So there's a backup utility inside of Management Studio that allows you to create a backup file. So actually the first thing I'm going to do is go into my project and I'm going to create a folder in here called DB. And I'm going to take a backup and save my backup in that folder. So this way, when you push all your code to GitHub, the backup of the database will be included. And I'll know if I see this DB folder, I'm going to have to download your project and restore your database in order to run it. So again, this is sort of a last resort. So if I connect in Object Explorer, I right-click my database, and if I choose Tasks, about 2/3 of the way up, there's a backup option here. Now this backup will back it up to a default location inside of Program Files and SQL Server. We don't want to back it up there because then your web project's over here and your database is over there. And I need all the files. I'll choose backup. So this is where it goes by default. Program Files, SQL Server, in there somewhere there's a backup folder. And it creates a file with the same name as the database and a .bak extension. So if I click OK, it will take a backup, but it's going to take a backup in that folder. So what I'm going to do is click Remove, and then I'm going to click the Add button, and I'm going to browse to go and find my project folder. I think it's not even letting me back it up there. Okay, I better cancel that. So I think I may have to back it up to the default location and then copy the file. So I'll take a backup here and then I'll have to go to that folder and copy this. So my database is teeny tiny. It backs up in like half a second. But now I'm going to have to go into my program files, SQL Server, 14, and backup. Here's my file that was just created. So I'm going to copy this file into my new DB folder. So I'll paste it in here. So even my empty database is 3 megs. There's like 5 tables with 2 records in it. So now I'll go back and upload this to GitHub. So now I can put in normally I'd never copy the database in here, but this is only in the event that you're asking me to run your project locally in order to grade it. So now when I go to my repository, when I go to your repository, I should see a DB folder. If I see the DB folder with a backup file, I know that I'm going to have to download, unzip your project. Then I have to restore your database to my server in order to be, and change your connection string in order to be able to run it. I would prefer not to have to do this for a class of 36 students. If you can get your site running on one of those servers or another server, it's going to mean I can give you your feedback and your grades much faster than if I have to download and restore 36 projects to my local server. So it's also beneficial to you if your projects are actually running online. If they're local, it means you can't show them when you're out job hunting. You're not going to say to an employer, here's a zip file. Why don't you restore all this on your machine and you can see my work? Right? It would be much better if it's up and live on the internet somewhere. So I'm not forcing you to spend money on hosting, trying to give you options and ways of doing this without having to spend any money, but it's still going to be better for everybody if things are not locally. So this is your last resort, but it will work if you absolutely have to do it this way. You can. Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn all my Azure services off because I don't have any more free credits and they wouldn't give me any more. They told me that I have to spend money and then file a support ticket and they'll reimburse me, which is a pain. So I'm just going to stop my services. So there should be a stop. So if I stop my database, so I might just have to delete it. I don't know if I can stop it. There doesn't seem to be a stop for the database. Maybe I can, in my configure, I can stop it because it says it's running. I may just have to delete it. No, all it lets me do is scale it up. Okay. So I'll just go and delete these things. I don't really need them. I just wanted to walk through the process of how we would set them up and how I would deploy them. So I'm going to put my connection string back to work with my local database. Because for the purposes of running this in class, it's going to be faster when I connect locally anyway. I can delete my Azure server here. I'll just work locally. And one other thing, I did make an announcement yesterday, but I've had to change my office hours this week. So the 2 hours that I normally have on Wednesday from 11 until 1, those have moved to Thursday. I have to go to an event tomorrow afternoon, so I still have that time available. It's just moved to Thursday. So last week in class, we started using the scaffold. We created one controller. We scaffolded a category controller. Just close everything up here. And we added a few categories and made sure that they were in our database. So let's go ahead now. We want to also scaffold out a products controller with views. So we can start adding, editing, and deleting products. And then we're going to have to make some changes. This stuff is functional, but it's not exactly like production quality. So we use the scaffold to give us a starting place, and then we start making changes so that our site is more user-friendly, looks better, works better, and is more what our more in line with what our actual requirements are. So I'm going to create a new controller. I'll right-click on my controllers folder and click Add a Controller. And it will default to the same option we picked last time, which is the MVC controller with views using Entity Framework. So this is the option you'll pick in your assignment. You'll use this option to scaffold your 2 controllers and your 10 views that'll come along with them. I'll click Add. This time our controller is going to manage our products. So we'll pick the product model. It should default to my database connection class that we generated. It should give it a name of products controller. And we want to make sure we use our layout page so that we get our header and footer. So I'll just click Add and we'll let Visual Studio generate those 6 files. Now we've created a new controller, so we'll want to build the project. And now we can try to load the files. Index view, we just replace the end of the URL and put products on the end. Looks like I might have. Wow. Figured connecting locally would be fast. I set my database connection back to local. This is my local connection. Okay, super slow. So we get this empty product screen. So let's go ahead. Actually, I added some images, so bear with me for a second. I'll add a few. So I'll create a new product. I'm going to leave the photo out. But notice one of the neat things the scaffold does. We didn't see this last week because we were just working with the category table. Notice this section here. We automatically get this drop-down list with all the categories. Why did we get this? How is it smart enough to know this drop-down should be here? Right, our category and product tables, if I open up my database, I should probably comment that out. But in my connection class, we have this relationship between, so every product has a category. One category, many products. So because we set up a one-to-many relationship with the foreign key in the database, this is in our database connection class. And in here, if we look at our product model, every product has a category foreign key. When we scaffold, we automatically get a drop-down list so the user can pick one of those categories. Right? So this saves us a lot of work. We don't have to generate a query to populate that drop-down. It's automatically here from the scaffold. So I'll just go ahead and create a product. We'll come back and we may have time to deal with the photo later. I don't want to type in the photo. So it's saved to my database. I'm going to go back in here. So this page is functional. It also, we automatically have validation built in. Where would we go in our Visual Studio project to see where this validation comes from? Okay, well so I'll open up my product controller and I'll click on this second create method. So the first one is the get that loads the form. This one here that says create product. There's our method. So Tyler, we're partly right. It's not doing specific validation, but it is checking in general. Is the model state valid? Yes or no? So it is being checked here, but what about the specific rules? Because it says description and photo, it's okay we leave those blank, but name and price can't be. So where would it be defined that, where in our project are product name and product price defined as required fields? In the database, yes, but somewhere in our project as well. Yeah, did you say it? Yeah, so in our product model, our name property has a required attribute here on line 17. Notice our description doesn't have one. Probably easier if I put in a couple spaces, be easier to see. So our price has to be a decimal and our product name is required. So it automatically, if we violate any of these rules, the scaffold automatically generates a message, an alert in red. So that's good. Now I'd suggest there's a few things we would want to change on this. What changes would you make to this before you showed it to the client and said, okay, we think this page is done? It's functional, but it's not complete. What's one thing you would change? Okay, you would change. Okay, so we could change those messages. Okay, so yeah, up here we could probably fix the header. Okay, so let's put in a more descriptive message here. So this message is automatic. Maybe we want it to say product name is required. So if we go into our product model, inside of this required attribute on line 18, we can customize the error message. So we see here a bunch of optional parameters. So we can set up that the error message is equal to product name is required in round brackets. So if we customize that message, I'm going to reload the page and then try and submit an empty one again. It should now give us our custom error message instead. Sorry, you're still looking at it. So I just modified line 18. So if I resubmit my form now, hopefully our custom error message shows up here instead. So those error messages with our validation rules, they're fully customizable. We can just put into the model what the error message for any field should be. So we can make those more descriptive depending on who our users are. So that's one thing, we customized that message. Anything else about this form you would change? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's change that. We'll have to write a bunch of code on the back end later, but let's change this. Yeah, it should be a file dialog box, allows the user to browse and choose a photo rather than ask them to type in a photo name, a file name. That makes no sense. So where would we go to change that? Would that be in the model or the view or the controller? Yeah, it'd be in the view. So if I go into products, so views, products, and create, down here on line 33, that's our text box for the photo. So what attribute, HTML attribute, would I add to this tag to turn it from a text box into a file dialog box? Arya? So type equals file. Now, it won't be fully functional yet. It won't actually save, but that should convert it from a text box to a file dialog control. So I just added this on line 33. Again, I'll go and refresh. And hopefully this section of our view should change. Right, so the text box is gone. I now get a browse button. That lets me open. It isn't going to save it. We're going to have to write the code to actually save that file. But on the front end, at least, that's another change we would need to make. Any other changes you would make to this? Yeah, so it just grabs the foreign key field name. So what should we change that to instead? Yeah, let's just call it a category. Let's take the ID word off the label. So again, that's going to be in the view right here on line 37. Here's our label. Our label can just say category, not category ID. So I'll just change that. Something else about our, so we can reload it again. This label should change. So we've made one change in the model, 2 changes in the view. What about this drop down? How would you make this more user friendly? What's wrong with it? It's functional, but it's not ideal. We could give it a, yeah, it does have a, we could have a default option. What if this list is really long? It's a good idea, but it's a bit complicated. So we'll come back to it maybe on another lesson. Thanks, Francis. We could do it as an autocomplete. Yeah, again, yeah, maybe let's just sort it alphabetically. So at least if there's 20 items, I can scan from A to Z to find the category I want. We can't put a placeholder in that's in a text only. It'd be great if we could, but that property I don't think exists for a select box. So so we have this ASP items tag in here, and it's using the view bag and accessing this property called category ID. So we can't actually do the sorting in the view. So where do you suppose we would go to resort that data in the list? Would it be in a model or in a controller? Yeah, so let's look at our we go to our product controller, inside of our index method. So here's the code that runs, sorry, not our index method, it would be our create method. The first create with no parameters. This is the get version that loads the form. This is the post version that saves the form. So here it's setting out a new select list using our database connection, our category model, and it says set the ID as the value and set the category names as the text field. So this is our data. Here's our collection or our list. So what we want to do is we want to order this alphabetically. So right now, this just gives us the categories by ID. If we add more categories, they'll just appear at the bottom of the list. It's ordered by the category ID from the oldest to the newest. So we can actually add an ordering here. If I type dot, we get a whole bunch of methods related to this list of data, and one of them is ordered by. So it's kind of like writing an order by clause in SQL, but it's like a shorthand. Query the database for all the categories and then order them. So we just set up an anonymous parameter. So C just refers to the list of categories. It's just a variable I'm creating. And we'll add C dot name. So order by the category names. Good question. So we're going to see these a lot. So we're calling this function, it's a function call, but it has no name. We're not creating a new function. We're basically using a built-in function. So we want to call this and pass in the list of data so that we can access the name property for sorting. So we'll see this more. We'll see it a lot in JavaScript. We'll see it next semester when we do Node.js. Common way of passing data to an anonymous function. So it's called a lambda expression. So if we save this change and refresh our view, our list of categories should now be sorted alphabetically with desktop as the first category, even though it's category ID 2 and laptops are category ID 1. So I'll just reload my page and we'll check how our list looks. So now we get desktops, then laptops, then printers. If we inspect this element, we are right there. So if we inspect it, our select list, I know it's hard to see, but it's in the order. So ID 2 is first, ID 1 is second, ID 3 is third. So this is always going to be in alphabetical order now that we've added. So I've just added what's highlighted in blue. The rest of the code is generated by the scaffold. Visual Studio wrote the rest of the line. So again, we're taking what Visual Studio gave us and we're modifying it, we're customizing it to give a better user experience on the front end of things. And then the last thing I'll do, I agree with you, Stephen. So notice the headings it does at the top. It gives us an H1 with the name of the method. The method is called, the name of the view is called create. So it gives us an H1 with create and then an H4 with the model name. Kind of a lousy page title. So maybe we should just do this as a single heading. It says create a new product. And I'll put that the same as my page title, create a new product. And then I'm going to get rid of that H4. We really don't need it. We can just have one descriptive title across the top and in the browser tab. So there, we've got a better title. There's no reason to have an H1 and an H4. So the scaffold isn't perfect. It doesn't really give us production level user interface. It's not all that usable. It's a starting point. It's probably done 50% of the work we would have had to do to get all this done ourselves. So whenever we use scaffolding, we're going to have to customize the views like we've done here. We've made 1, 2, 3, 4 changes in the view. We've made 1 change in our controller, and we've made 1 change in our model. Actually, we're going to make 1 more change in our model, and then we're going to take a break. I'll add a new product. I'm going to use these products because I went and grabbed some of the images. You can use whatever products you like. What's going to happen if I try and save this? Let's see. Okay, the edit views and methods work, so I can always go in and edit it. So let's see what happens. So it actually saves. It saves because our validation rule only says this has to be a decimal number. So if I type in ABC, it's going to give me an error. If I put in text and try and save that, validation will work, but there's nothing to prevent me from putting in, as long as it's a number, but putting in a number that doesn't really make any sense. So we're going to add 1 more validation in our model. So it can go either above or below line 25 that sets it up as a decimal. What I want to set here is a range. So the range, we've got to supply a minimum and a maximum, and then we can supply an error message. So what's the lowest possible price we might sell something for? $1? Or even 0, right? We want to put something on sale for free. Maybe we could, so we'll set that as a minimum. Maximum, but who knows what we're selling in the store, so we may as well make it pretty high, right? And then an error message equals what is supposed to be. So if I build and try to save now with a negative number, it should give me this error message. And these validation rules work both when we're adding and when we're editing. Model applies automatically in both cases. So we don't have to rewrite the logic twice, once for adding and once for editing. The model will apply in both instances. So I've added line 26. I'll try my code now. Put it as another negative number and try to save. And hopefully our validation should kick in and it should say that that negative number, yeah, process word review, good. So it says 799 is not acceptable, and then we get a custom error. It says the price has got to be between 0 and 999. Now I can save it. So these are the kinds of customizations to the MVC scaffold we're always going to have to do, and you'll need to do you'll want to do in your assignment. Scaffold will give us something that works, but it doesn't necessarily work as well as it needs to. So we're about due for a break. I'm going to step out for a minute and grab a coffee. I'll push these changes up to GitHub, and then we come back. We're going to look at making some more changes. We're going to want to maybe do some price formatting. We may want to shuffle things around. And then if we've got time, hopefully we can look at getting the photo upload functional, so we can actually browse to product photos and save those and have those show up in our site.